So as I say, since I joined Jacobs 3 years ago, I've been working almost full-time on this Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade Programme, which is a railway upgrade between York and Manchester. Its aim is to improve connectivity. So we're talking about increased journey time, increased capacity, which means more bums on seats. And with this programme, it's a big investment. I think it's the biggest one in the next 5 years that's going to be delivered. And as part of that, and we're only just starting the journey, I guess, in terms of the digital twin, which has opened the door, if you like, to the CSIC research that I'm going to be talking about later in this session. Just the graphic on the right, there's 3 blocks highlighted. They're meant to highlight the delivery partners. So it's been delivered by 3 different teams, and each one comprises over, in total, it comprises over 40 organisations. And Jacobs and Network Rail are working in quite close collaboration in terms of in the program management office. So we've got a quite high level view on things. So jumping from the program and into the research we applied, I'm going to go through the research step by step, again as quickly as I can, but hopefully it will make some sense. So it is a 7-step process that the CSIC researchers have developed. It's a top-down approach, so it starts right at the top and looks at the organisational objectives, and it goes right down to asset information level. And in terms of how we see that fitting in terms of what we're working on with Network Rail, is trying to get the digital foundation right. Before we move into the digital twin, we want to make sure that we've got the information, the data we're collecting in a really good state. And actually, Network Rail, from all the workshops we've been doing with them, which I'll talk about quickly later, that is one of the key feedbacks they gave us, is that they really appreciated that rather than us going into the nice jazzy digital twin type things, which everyone gets excited about, we've looked at more of the foundations and the fundamental kind of core behind it. Okay, so I'm going to go through each step, the 7 steps, and hopefully it will make a bit more sense. So as I say, it's 7-step framework. Step number 1 is application of an asset classification system. So for organizations that already have one, they probably could skip this step, but really if you want to use best practice, the suggestion is Uniclass. I've got an example of Uniclass being applied there on a signaling system, a rail signaling system. And really the key thing, the reason why I've included it, is it demonstrates the link between a function and an asset, which will be useful later on. So that's going to go plugged into my flowchart that I'm going to go through. So that's number 1. Then step 2 is obtaining all your organizational objectives. So for the Trans-Pennine Route Upgrade Programme, this led us to complete a task where we had to identify all of Network Rail's organizational objectives. Then you go on to step 3, and I got an example, there is an example there underneath the graphics. So step 2, improve customer satisfaction. So that gives a bit more context. Step 3, through the organizational objectives, you then obtain the critical success factors. And what that means is you outline all the kind of factors that are critical for the organization to meet their initiatives. So in this example, we've got an objective to improve customer satisfaction. Well, as Network Rail and its organization plays a part in the railway, what are the critical success factors in order to achieve that? And there's some examples there, so on-time service, consistent operations, value for money, and I'm sure there's loads more. Then going on to step 4. So bearing in mind all the critical success factors that we've kind of captured, step 4 is around developing a simple question that the organization must answer in order to manage that factor successfully. And the example there is how many trains are late. So if we are, one of our success factors is on-time service, obviously one of the first questions you would ask yourself is, well, how many trains are late at the moment? And through that, draws out the information you need in order to answer that question, and that's your first output. And they're your organisational information requirements. So that's output number 1. Then we go down to a step level, a step down, if you like. So step 4 is at an organisational level. Step 5 is taking a step further down into your functional outputs. So again, in terms of Network Rail and its organisation, you're talking about, as an example, the control movement of traffic, which is one of its functional outputs it needs to do in order to achieve its role, if you like. And again, it's following it back up that kind of line of sight. So you've got control movement of traffic as your functional output. That is needed to ensure that our services are running on time. And the reason why we need our services to run on time is so we can improve customer satisfaction. Okay, and then again, with those functional outputs, that draws out more information we need to ensure that we can continue to produce that function, if you like. Then going down to step 6, which is your asset level. And again, going through that line of sight, so we're thinking, well, control movement of traffic, one of the key systems to enable us to do that, and apologies for those with no railway background, but I've gone for interlocking, and interlocking is just some sort of signalling equipment. But either way, it's heavily involved in terms of the management of traffic. And that's when you're teetering out the information you need at that asset level to ensure that that is continuing to contribute to the function. So there's step 7 as well. So all those green information requirements, the outputs, you go on step 7, and then that's when you go on to your validation step. So you go, well, is this information necessary? So do we need it as an organisation? And then your next question is this information sufficient? So when I first went through this kind of 7-step process, when you go through it logically, and this is what James Heaton and Ajif have been working on, it kind of makes sense, and there's nothing crazy there. In terms of, it's not crazily intelligent that people are going to get their minds blown. But that for me is one of the key strengths of this process is in fact that it goes back to basics, it follows that logic through, and it makes sense. And I'll just touch on a key challenge here actually is, so those who have worked with Network Rail at the moment, the current situation is quite far from this nice line of sight kind of approach, and much of the information we capture is resulted from engineers on the ground who have told us through evolution going into the digital world what information they need just to do their job, which is fine. It's just it lacks that link back up to the food chain, if you like, up to your key strategic initiatives. Okay, benefits, and this is just kind of linking back to the Trans-Pennine route upgrade. I mentioned earlier that we're beginning our journey on the digital twin. We really see this this approach as a fundamental kind of building block to make sure that a digital twin is a success. Otherwise, I mean, the risk is you create a digital twin which looks really good, but no one uses it because it's just not giving you that information that is needed for that certain decision you want to make. Okay, how am I doing for time? Yeah, okay. Now I'm going into the application. So we've got this method. Hopefully it makes a bit more sense now. Well, then how did we actually apply this on the program and with Network Rail? And I should have said this earlier, but all those information requirements that we capture, that flow chart I went through, much of that is done through a workshop environment with Network Rail, and that's been one of the key successes of our secondment. Because, in matter of fact, I think the secondment officially finishes today, so we're in quite a good step there. We're looking back, and I can report on all the stuff we've done. Okay. In terms of the application, so this was a 4-month secondment. I'm not sure whether that's the same for everyone, but our secondment was a 4-month type time lapse from December to, like I say, to the end of March today. And we broke it down into these 6 key core milestones, if you like. And number 1, pretty obvious. So I'm looking at the graphic on the left, is research familiarization. And really what that means is we've looked through the papers that were given to us, try to really understand the process, and then pick out some potential pain points where we might have some difficulty, because like I say, we only had 4 months. We wanted to give it justice. We wanted to properly apply it, get some good feedback. So within that, understanding the complexities of the research, that drew out the next milestones, the 2 to 6. And one of these, looking onto your right, was around getting all the organisational objectives. So for those who probably have been out of the industry or a bit out of touch in terms of Network Rail, they have quite a lot of documents, a lot of high-level strategic documents. From what I remember, it was over 40. Within that, you've got quite a lot of pages, again, over 2,000 pages. So reading through all that and obtaining the organisational objectives manually, which was initially kind of what I was going to do when I started, it would have took quite a while. So instead, we kind of developed this algorithm which uses Python, which I'm sure some of you are experts in. And the algorithm searches through all the documents and tells you where an organisational objective may be located. And this really streamlined the process. So it turned it from potential 2-week activity into 2 to 4 hours. These are the results. So again, in the context of Network Rail, they have kind of these key initiatives: safe, reliable, efficient, growing, and they're kind of strapline. They've got 2. They've got putting passengers first, and they've also got a better railway for a better Britain. I kind of went through the organisational objectives and categorised them myself in a bit of a manual process. It could have been potentially done, a lot more intelligently, but again, given the time, that's what we've done. And outputted the following. So there were 60 organisational objectives identified overall, and as you can see, a lot of them are more focused on kind of generating efficiencies, which is great if you're thinking about creating a digital twin.
Aaron, you have about 3 minutes to go.
Thank you. So as I said, the organisational kind of requirements is through a workshop setting, and that drew another challenge. So if I was going to sit down with quite a lot of Network Rail colleagues, some really senior, some working on the field, they've all got limited time, and to be honest, they only will engage if you've got their interest. So to help with that, I developed a web application using Microsoft Power Apps, and it goes through the methodology, the 7-step process, barring the first step, so 2 to 7, in a quite intuitive way, where you follow the drop downs and record your requirements as you go along. And that got really good feedback from Network Rail. In terms of the workshops themselves, we completed 5 overall. As I said, the engagement was really fantastic from Network Rail. They were really positive about the method. I got engagement from the senior RAMs. So those who don't know, they're quite high up in terms of the organisation and look after millions of assets. And some of their quotes are there. Apologies, but I'll have to flick through this. Then, yeah, I think the key output from the application, one of the key feedbacks we got from Network Rail was around having to do the validation step right at the end, which created a risk that you would need to correct maybe potentially quite a lot of requirements if they're not sat in the right place. So we suggest actually you should have the validation step as and when you're inputting every piece of information. Okay, outputs, I've alluded to these earlier, but the idea was with the app and this kind of algorithm, you join them together and you've got a toolkit there where you can repeat the process. Output number 2, don't want to go through these in detail, but I think there's a good discrepancy here. What we realised through a further 3 workshops for Network Rail, which I did last week, is that employing the methodology, you had benefits through just employing some of the steps, so discreetly. So even just applying step 1, for example, the asset classification system, would streamline asset handover. And again, those in industry would know that if you don't get that right, that can cost millions of pounds. Then there's the other end, where if we employed this methodology in full, you've got your long-term benefits, and that's where you're going down, breaking down silos, the alignment between what you're collecting at asset level all the way up to your strategic objectives. And finish on next steps. Apologies, 5 minutes over, but next steps. So now we've kind of got really good feedback from Network Rail. Their appetite, I think, is quite good for this. As I say, we're working on TransPennine route upgrade, so that we're going to try and create a strategy. I say try, we are going to create a strategy as to how we could employ this on the TransPennine route upgrade program, such that the maximum value is obtained really early on, because it's quite a big task, and kind of roll it out iteratively. And that's it. Thank you very much.